My name is Emily Bade. I graduated in 2017 from the Theater and Media Arts department. I think that I had a fairly positive experience at BYU, but it's only because I was completely blind to the fact that I was queer until my second to last semester. And so I didn't realize that I was queer until I was like 22 or 23, I was like 22 before I realized. And like, there were so many signs and I like kind of was suspecting it for a while before I actually finally came out to myself. But because there were like all these girls that I had huge crushes on, and I was just like, wow, I really admire all these girls that I'm like in classes with and working on projects with and all these things. And so it took me so long to realize that I was queer that I just had an oblivious and like fine time at BYU up until that. And like obviously there were other things where I like didn't really feel like I belonged in the church, and so that kind of made it hard, but I kind of just didn't associate those things with being queer. I was like, BYU's fine. I'm very straight, clearly, and like it's fine. And then I think that my last kind of semester and a half, I realized that I was queer like the week before the 2016 election, which was unfortunate timing. And so I think that like the last semester and a half were pretty rough to like kind of like I was dating somebody for the first time and realizing that I was queer for the first time, and all these like really big emotions that happened that I think that if those had happened earlier in my time at BYU, it would have been a lot harder to be there. So my time was pretty easy because of oblivion and ignorance. Yeah, since graduating, I kind of, for the first 2-ish years or so of graduating, was in a pretty like unhealthy relationship, because I got into this relationship at BYU and then was just kind of like, oh, this is the only experience I have being queer. I need to stay with it. I need to like take care of this person. And so it wasn't until like last March that I finally got myself out of that relationship. And so I feel like almost from like April of 2017 to March of 2019, I was kind of just surviving after BYU. Like I kind of just like was running on fumes and like not really living my life. And since I got out of that relationship, I have been like trying to figure out what I actually want to do, figuring out like my spirituality, getting into a happier relationship, going to therapy, like doing all these things that are like actually positive. And so I feel like it took me a long time to like actually start like living my life after BYU. And it's been kind of like a fairly recent development for me. I think it was like a lot of little things that happened over time, because there definitely were, as I've like looked back over, I like kind of made myself like a queer timeline of my life, and as I've looked back, I'm like, oh, I was obsessed with this like Laurel in my ward when I was at Beehive and thought she was like the absolute most gorgeous, talented, amazing person, and I'm like, I had a crush on her. And so I feel like I like had all these like really strong feelings for women growing up, all like since I was like a tween, but I didn't realize for a really long time that those were anything other than like just admiration. Like I really didn't understand what a crush was. And so especially like in high school, everyone would be like, oh, like we all have crushes on these boys. And I was like, yeah, me too. Totally have a crush. And I picked like this guy that I knew in middle school that was like, I guess attractive, to men or to women in middle school. And just always throughout high school was like, yep, still have a crush on that guy, but he got weirder and weirder, and I didn't update my like fake crush, and so by the end of high school, everyone was like, yeah, you still have a crush on that guy, like, and you don't even try to talk to him, and I'm like, yeah, you don't try to talk to crushes. And like there was like a guy my sophomore year of high school who he was like, I like you, and he like ended up kind of stalking me, which was kind of creepy, but I would like hug him in the hallway and like not even talk to him. I'd be like, yep, I have a crush on him, never think about him or want to talk to him at all. And so like I didn't understand what a crush was. And like then I got to BYU, and my roommates wanted to have boys at our apartment all the time, and like I just had no interest in that at all. And like I think that they picked up pretty fast, not that I was queer, but that like something was going on. Like I had a roommate my freshman year who was just like, Emily, you are just really quirky, and someday you're gonna find somebody who's just as quirky as you are, and then you're gonna get married right away. And so like kind of stuff like that kept happening, where I was like, I don't understand what everyone is like doing, like being obsessed with all these guys and stuff. And so it took a long time of just like, I kind of thought like, oh, I'm just really focused on my studies and I don't really care about boys. But I thought like, oh, once like a guy comes along that I'm interested in, then we'll get married and we'll have a bunch of babies and get married in the temple and it'll be fine. And so I just kind of thought that like the right one hadn't come along. And then I went, when I was 21, I went on a trip to Malawi and like I went with like BYU and kind of built my own internship. And since I built my own internship, it was like just as cheap to fly straight to Malawi and back as it was to fly to Malawi and then go through Europe for like 3 weeks and then go back. And so I like did this whole summer in Europe kind of by myself. Like I traveled in Europe and stuff and met people while I was there, but traveled. And well, after that I was kind of like, oh, it might be nice to like have somebody that I like love to travel with. And like, why haven't I felt all these things that maybe I want to like be with somebody and have that experience with somebody? And so I started I was like, I need to find somebody. I need to get serious about dating. And so I would go on Tinder and I would sit with my best friend and she's straight and she would be like, this boy's nice looking. He's a cute boy. He's smart. He's interested in the same things as you are. And I'd be like, no, I don't want to talk to him. And like would swipe left on everybody. And like I would swipe right on like guys that I kind of knew and they would like reach out to me and be like, sure? And I'd be like, no, never mind. And so just that over and over again made me kind of realize like, oh, I think that what I've been feeling about girls, and there were a couple of girls, particularly in like my freshman and sophomore years of college, that I like had massive crushes on and stuff, that I was like, oh, I think that those were crushes and it wasn't just admiration. And so it kind of took all of that time, especially like hours and hours on Tinder of being like, okay, let's like evaluate all these men. And then I was like, no, actually this isn't for me. And once I kind of started digging that way, then I was like, oh, there's like so much evidence over here. So it was a very, very slow process. Yeah, so I kind of realized that I was queer in like kind of between September and November of 2016. And I came out to a couple of close friends, and then started dating somebody like right around that time, like very early on. And then it wasn't until May of 2017, there was like kind of a family emergency or a friend emergency that brought my mom to Utah. My parents live in Colorado. And so, I like had gotten endowed. I didn't go on a mission, but I had like gotten endowed and I wasn't going to the temple and I was still wearing my garments at that time and stuff, but I was kind of faced with this couple of days with my mom where I was like, oh crap, like we have 5 or 6 days together where like she's here to support my little sister, but my little sister's gonna be busy, so I'm gonna kind of be the person keeping her busy. And I knew that she would want to go to the temple. And so as we met up, and it was in the first like hour that we were together, she was like, oh, do you want to go to the temple while I'm here? And I was like, no, I don't. Like, I don't want to do that. And she was like, and I was not planning on telling her that I was queer at all, in the slightest. And I was not ready to like be out to my parents because I was still kind of figuring a lot of stuff out. And so she was like, why don't you want to go to the temple? And I was like, oh, I just haven't been doing stuff that I'm supposed to be doing. And she was like, what does that mean? And I was like, I haven't been paying my tithing. And she was like, okay, which is like such a BS answer. But I was just like, yeah, I haven't been paying my tithing. I can't possibly go to the temple. And of course, then she was like, are you gay? And she'd asked for years beforehand. She would call me and be like, are you gay? And I'd be like, no, because I didn't know that I was gay. And so finally she was like, are you actually gay? And I was like, yeah. And so that's how I came out to my mom, and she told my dad and my older sister and things. And I didn't come out publicly until last September. So like a lot of people in my life knew, and like coworkers and friends and stuff knew, but it wasn't until like a little over a year ago that I like finally actually came out. Yeah, I chose to go to BYU primarily because of parental like money and things like that. Like I didn't have a ton of opportunity to work in high school, so I didn't have any savings or really any knowledge of like how I would go to college without my own money. And so that was the big impetus. And neither of my parents went to BYU, so they really thought that BYU was like the place where we all needed to be. Just a lot of like depression and anxiety I have a PTSD diagnosis, but that's from some other stuff. So just, yeah, mostly lots of good old depression and anxiety. Yeah, I never really felt like I like belonged in Mormonism, and I really didn't even want to go to BYU. I came to BYU because like it was the only option for my parents to pay for college, and so that was like the option. And so I like didn't really feel like I belonged in the church. I felt like I was too liberal and that there wasn't a space for me and all these things. And then in my sophomore year of college, I was like, okay, I really need to like give it a chance, and like maybe I'm just like not seeing what everyone else is seeing about this religion. And so I went through the temple and did everything and like really felt very close to Mormonism for a long time. And then kind of as soon as I realized that I was queer, I was like, I can't be associated with the church. I can't do that. And so I just kind of was like, I don't believe in this anymore. I'm going to walk away from everything. And it's only been very recently that I've realized that like spirituality and like all things like God and a loving God and like charity and faith and all those things aren't owned by the church, and like they are still like good, valuable, moral things. And so I have been like kind of exploring Judaism a little bit. It's only been very recently that I even was like, oh, I think I actually do believe in God. Because I kind of thought that God was owned by Mormonism. And it was only recently that I was like, oh, no, he's not. Like, or they're not, or she's not, or whoever. And so I just turned to my fiance like last week and I was like, I think I believe in God. And I think we should like try to find like a queer friendly church, whether that's Christian or not Christian or whatever. So I kind of feel like I'm on the cusp of like a new spiritual journey that's like kind of separate from Mormonism. That's such a good question. I think that like, I don't love the advice. I hear a lot of people be like, no queer people should be at BYU. Like, if you're queer, you should get out. And I think that like, if you're queer, I don't think that blanket statements work for everybody. Like, I think that there are a lot of reasons, a lot of good reasons to go to BYU. It's a good school. And so I think that for queer people that are at BYU, like, I would really encourage them to like have a really strong support system, especially if they're going to stay, be in therapy and like just be really in tune with like what they want and what good things are coming from BYU and what bad things are coming from BYU. And as soon as that tips where it's more bad things than good, like have an escape plan and like have a second school or have, like kind of have like an emergency plan. Cause I think that when I was so close to graduating by the time I realized that I was queer, but like, I think even if I had realized sooner, I wouldn't have switched schools because it would have been hard to like tell my parents or do any of those sorts of things. And I think that like the biggest thing that any of us can do is like protect our mental health and protect our well-being. And so as long as like staying here and staying healthy and that is at the core of like whatever you're doing, it's fine to stay at BYU. But just like making sure that there's like cueing into all of those kind of things going on.